Welcome to Grassroots Iowa, conversations at the crossroads of faith and politics, the show where we explore how biblical principles intersect with public policy, family values, and the future of our great state. I'm your host, Pastor Jeremy Higgins, and I'm coming to you from right here in our studio at Calvary Community Church. Today we are honored to welcome State Senator Sandy Salmon, who represent Iowa Senate District number 29. Senator Salmon's a United States Marine Corps veteran. She's a farmer, a former home educator, a wife, mother, and grandmother who has served Iowans with conviction in both the House and the Senate. She knows what it means to stand for things like pro-life advocacy, pro-family, constitutional and fiscal conservatism. And she's a champion of limited government, local control and education, and protecting our agricultural heritage. Senator Salmon, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really do appreciate it. I'm excited to have this conversation with you about faith, about freedom, and no doubt about Iowa's future. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's good to be here with you.
Well, it's a pleasure. I really was excited to have this conversation. You know, I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask everybody right out of the gate. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your faith background. You know, what does that journey look like? When did you come to the Lord, and how has that affected your family life, your political life? No doubt there's a lot of different strains on that journey. We'd love to hear more about it.
Well, thank you. I was raised on a farm in northwest Iowa, and I was raised in the Lutheran Church.
Okay.
And our Lutheran youth group went to see a Billy Graham film.
Wow.
And that was in 1970. And that's when I felt like Christ revealed himself to me.
Wow.
And I felt like I really saw the light from God. I remember when Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life," and they talked about Jesus being the light of the world. Oh, wow. Billy Graham talked about that in that film, and just a transformation came into my heart at that time.
That's awesome.
I didn't know anything about praying a sinner's prayer or anything like that, but I did know that my life was transformed and that things were different after that.
Praise the Lord. So how old were you then, if you don't mind me asking?
15.
15. Very cool.
Yes.
So over the years then, that faith base has interacted with your family life, your public life. How do you see that affecting, just your everyday interactions, say like at the state capitol?
Well, I've walked with the Lord many years.
Yeah.
Before I came to be at the State House.
Sure.
I homeschooled my kids.
Love that.
For 18 years.
Wow,
I
good for you.
spent doing that. I homeschooled them all the way through high school, and I just felt like I needed to be committed to my family.
Yeah, I love that.
And I felt drawn to that. I felt the Lord led me.
That's a huge calling. Homeschooling is not easy. My wife and I, primarily my wife, if I'm being honest, has homeschooled our sons, and it's amazing the process and being a part of their education and being able to input that faith base alongside of the math and the history and the science and those things. I really love that was on your heart.
Yeah, that was so important to both my husband and I. And we were so busy homeschooling, raising our kids, we watched homeschool freedom unfold. Yeah. When we began homeschooling, it was illegal in the state of Iowa.
I like to hear that. All right. You're a bit of ruffian.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. There was one narrow exception that the state allowed, and that was that you could homeschool under the supervision of a licensed teacher.
Sure. That
was from Walnut Ridge Baptist Academy or Grandview Baptist.
Really?
And
it's pretty limited.
Those are only two hosts that could have a supervising teacher that you could legally homeschool. So it was a very narrow sliver, and we fell under that. That's how we were able to homeschool legally,
Sure.
but it was barely legally.
Right.
So, and then we watched as things unfolded and the homeschooling law was enacted and homeschoolers got involved, and wrote legislators, and
Nice.
I remember making phone calls during that time. And
Is that part of what drew you to the political realm?
well, I watched that. And then I had followed the pro-life issue and religious liberty issue all through the years, for many years. And that was one of the big impetuses for me to get involved, was to make a difference in the pro-life culture and religious liberty culture of the state. And I saw it could be done because we watched homeschool freedom unfold.
Right.
So, with a lot of hope and expectation and enthusiasm, I decided I felt like God was calling me to enter the political arena. So
how many kids do you have?
3.
3 kids. How many grandkids?
12.
Hey, praise the Lord. I have 3 sons, and I'm looking forward to this November. I'm supposed to be a grandpa, so I'm looking forward to that. I can't wait for that,
Well,
actually.
it's a great experience.
I'm excited, yeah. So how many years have you been in public office then?
14 years.
Wow, praise the Lord. Thank you for that.
I'm up for re-election this year, 2026. So I'm in the Iowa Senate now. I was in the Iowa House for 10 years, and then redistricting came along.
Yeah.
And the redistricting for me staying in the Iowa House looked awful. So I decided to move over to the Senate, which that setup looked much better for me. So I did that and was elected in 22 to the Senate. And then, of course, it's a 4-year term. So now I'm up for re-election again.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes. How many years did you serve in the Marine Corps?
I was in 2.5 years.
Okay, thank you for your service. Actually, it kind of leads into a question. Knowing that you served in the U.S. Marine Corps and now representing a district with pretty strong agricultural roots, how does your military service, kind of coupled with life on the farm? Because that's a different way of life. Military service can be rough, and that's a good lesson learned. Life on the farm also can be pretty tough. How has all that shaped your approach to public service and even your commitment to Iowa values?
Well, there was a lot of hard work on the farm.
Yeah.
And you were uncomfortable a lot of the time.
Right.
It was cold. It was hot. You were working very hard.
Yeah.
You sweated. There was a lot that had to be done. And, we had livestock. And so there was livestock to be tended to. And so my dad used to say, no matter what, Sandy, the most important thing on this farm is that those hogs have their water.
Oh, no.
And so, taking care of livestock was always the first thing that had to happen on the farm.
Yeah.
So it was a real commitment to responsibility.
And you don't have a choice. If you're not feeling good in the morning, you don't get to call it in. You've still got to get out there and, put out the water, make sure that the animals are fed. We don't have a lot of animals. My wife and I homestead, and we have some chickens and donkeys and goats, and just even on a smaller scale, it's not easy.
Right.
But we do love the impact that it has on our kids, and it does create that pretty strong work ethic. And I would imagine, the military also, there's a real strong work ethic that comes along with that.
Yes, that was another physical exercise, and the teamwork aspect. We had the teamwork on the farm. We had the teamwork in the military. You had to take responsibility on the farm. You had to take responsibility in the military. So it was a lot of the same values.
Yeah. So do you see that now at play in your political career? I mean, a long time service there. I mean, it definitely takes a community working together within the State House and the Senate. Tell us a little bit about that. How do people come together? Is there a good working environment there?
It has its ups and downs.
Sure.
There are people there. Not everyone agrees on
Sure.
how things should be.
And that's okay. I mean, that's part of,
and
the fabric
so-
of this country, right?
Yeah. So sometimes, you have to give way and wait for another better opportunity to advance your goals or legislation that you're trying to do.
Sure.
And then there's the time when everyone decides to come along with what you want to do. And so, that's a time of rejoicing.
Right. So it's a lot like farming. There's the
Yeah.
down times and the
Yes.
harvest also.
Yes.
I love
exactly.
that. So it's no secret. You're a pro-life champion. It's one of the things that I love about you. What do you see as the most important next steps for protecting the unborn and even supporting families and pregnancy centers here in Iowa? What can we do better?
Well, we have passed the heartbeat bill,
Yes,
which
amen. I love that.
protects a baby from the time a heartbeat is detected about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
And so that's a pretty strong bill.
Yeah.
And we also, this past session, we passed the bill to discourage out-of-state actors, abortionists, drug
All the
manufacturers
pills
from
coming in. Yeah.
coming into our state, shipping those pills into women in our state. It's terrible women's health care.
Exactly.
If anything else. And of course, it kills babies.
Yeah.
So we've done those things. And so the obvious next step is a life at conception bill that would cover everything. And we're still working towards that goal,
Yeah.
building support for that goal. It's
gotta be
there's a
rough
lot
going.
of people in the legislature now that feel kind of battle worn
Sure.
from the pro-life fight, and so you have to work with that.
Sure.
And
Trying to rally the troops probably is not always that
it's
easy.
tough. But one thing we've also done is we've provided funding grants to pro-life pregnancy centers to help them with their programs of outreach to women.
I love the
And that-
movement there. There's a lady who attends our church. I just did a Grassroots Iowa episode with Rachel Owen, who heads up Informed Choices Medical Clinics. And she's just an amazing woman of God and has just been a champion for the unborn through the years. Now kind of looking at next steps for her. It's exciting what's going on in her life. But, with that fight for the unborn, there's even a fight within, I think, the conservative party, like, oh, we've gone far enough. Let's just, leave it here, or, hey, let's take it further. I happen to, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I'm an abolitionist. I'd like to see it at conception. I'm also somebody, though, that's willing to celebrate, hey, we got a first down. It's going to take a few first downs to get the touchdown.
Right.
But I'm willing to celebrate all of the first downs along the way. And I think sometimes that gets lost in that movement. What are your thoughts on that?
Very much so. I feel like we didn't get to where we were overnight,
Right.
with having a full-on abortion allowed in the state. We didn't get to that place overnight.
Right.
And we're not going to get away from that place to the polar opposite, which is protecting life at conception overnight either. There has to be a certain amount of humility to realize, we've fallen a long, long ways, longer and farther than we thought we'd fallen.
Exactly.
And so now it's coming back, and it's going to take much more time. You wish it could happen all at once.
Sure.
But it takes some humility to realize it's not going to happen necessarily all at once.
Right.
And we're just going to have to keep working and building support, because the full-on protection at life at conception is where we need to be.
Yeah.
And continuing to support these pro-life pregnancy centers so that women have a place to go
Yes.
is all part of that all part of that whole resource that needs to come there for women and their babies.
Yeah. And, you mentioned like all of the drugs coming in from out of state too, and how important it's going to be to not just try to limit that, but to put a stop to it. I was actually reading an article from Liberty Counsel yesterday, and it was talking about a case that they're involved in where a boyfriend was secretly dosing his girlfriend with an abortion pill because she was refusing to have an abortion, and he caused the baby to abort by ordering the pills himself and sneaking them into things that she was consuming. And actually he's being charged with murder, which I'm happy to hear that, but it's interesting how when she wants to keep the baby, it's murder. And if she didn't, it's not murder, but that's a whole nother conversation maybe. But it is like one of those things that you realize it's so easy to get these pills. There are even like vending machines and things where young people, without permission from their parents, can access them in libraries around the state and things like that. So, I love hearing your heart.
Yeah. So what that bill did that we passed this last session was to say that a woman or a family member could sue an out-of-state abortionist or drug manufacturer that would ship those pills in.
Yeah.
Now, that isn't necessarily going to stop it.
Sure, of course.
But that does put them on notice that if they send those pills in, they are taking a risk.
Yeah.
They might be sued.
And I think a lot of companies, just that in and of itself.
And especially if the woman is past the gestational age where her baby's heartbeat can be detected, then it's a violation of our law.
Wow, yeah.
And so that bill was crafted that way, and people might wonder, well, why didn't you just make it illegal? And, well, the courts have not necessarily held up the bills that have passed other legislatures that have made it a criminal charge.
Right.
So we had tried to craft our law so that it would meet constitutional standards so that it would be able to stay in place and not be struck down.
Right.
Now, I don't think it's the most effective. I think we can improve on it. And as these cases, the case that you mentioned, that's a case out of Louisiana.
Yeah, it's not here in Iowa.
As that goes forward and the courts continue to make further rulings on this issue, we hopefully will be able to strengthen the law that we just put on the books.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's a fight worth fighting for. The lives of the unborn. In Proverbs 6, talks about 6 things the Lord hates. It says 7 are an abomination to him. And one of those things is the shedding of innocent blood. And there's nothing more innocent than a defenseless child, a child especially in his or her mother's womb, and fighting for their right to survive their time in that womb. That gestational period is the very least that we can do in this life. So not only are you a strong pro-life advocate, but, digging into you, you're also a strong advocate for fiscal responsibility. Thank you. We need more of that. I've heard you talk a lot about balancing the budget. I think that's something that would be fantastic to see. So with some of the recent property tax reforms, what other areas of state spending do you believe need tighter control, in order to keep taxes low for working class, kind of Iowa families?
Well, the property tax is certainly a good step forward.
Yeah, that was nice.
It takes 10% of the taxable value of your home, and then that is taken off the table as the portion that's decided on what's taxed.
Wow.
So
it's a big deal.
It goes from a minimum of $5,500 up to $20,000, and so I think it'll have an impact. I don't know that it'll have as great of an impact as people would hope.
Sure.
But
It's something. It's a start.
It's something that we have and need. We depend on our property taxes for so much.
Right.
They fund our schools and our roads and all the services counties and cities offer. And so you
have to be careful. You pull back on that too much. I mean, a lot of people, when they move here from other states, I think the first sticker shock they get is the property taxes. We moved here from Arizona, and there was a significant difference between what we paid there. What we paid there annually, we were paying here monthly, and for a similarly valued home. And it was shocking, but you also don't have millions of people stacked on top of each other. And so you need to be able to take care of the roads, to have that infrastructure. So I'm not against property taxes. And I don't think anybody in their right mind, anybody's really thinking this through, but I think we're taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah, right. We have kind of a fairly stagnant population. In the last 10 years, we added something like 60,000 people to the state. Oh, wow. That's pretty short. It's not as much as some states have experienced. And then we have an elderly population. Right. And so that means that their incomes are not as high. Right. So, we do have some challenges to face. And this is where I say, Iowa, we have to decide, what kind of people we want to attract. And I think the kind of people we want to attract here are young families that are raising their children. We don't necessarily want, all kinds of tourism.
Right.
I mean, we got a little, but Iowa is an agricultural state. It's a place where you can raise children in a healthy, strong environment where you can teach them good values, teach them faith, morals, good character, and teach them the values that will hold true for the rest of their lives. Yeah. So, I think when we craft state policy, we always need to keep that in mind. Is this policy going to attract the kind of people that we want in our state? Sure. Is it going to attract those families?
Yeah,
or is it going to attract the kind of people that want to just, live off the
state system,
the benefits that we have, and maybe aren't interested in working and building a future.
Right.
But young families are interested in that. And so
I agree. Actually, when my wife and I made the decision to move to Iowa, I mean, a huge part of that was a call the Lord placed in our lives to come here and to plant this church. But we didn't know where we were going to do that. And we looked all over the country, looked really hard at 22 different states, and looked at a lot of contributing factors within each of those states. And Iowa stood out. Oddly enough, I never wanted to live in the Midwest. I, at the time, loved the heat, in Arizona. I loved that summer heat. And I thought 60 degrees was cold. And now I'm absolute opposite. I really do enjoy the winters here. And I can't stand the thought of going to Arizona in the summertime. So, it's interesting how some of that can change, but there was a lot that attracted us to this state. And a lot of that, what you just mentioned was a big part of it. The moral factors, listen, they're a lot stronger today than they were when we moved here 17 years ago. The conservative voice in Iowa has really grown, and we're really blessed to, I think, be a part of that growth. But how else can we attract young families? You mentioned, wanting to make sure that the bills and legislature that's being passed is attractive, but what about, how do we bring in the right kind of jobs, and, what at the state level is being talked about in those regards?
Well, there's a lot of economic development type programs that we have to help attract businesses to come into the state. Of course, that's one of the impetus behind lower property taxes. Sure. and lower income taxes is when you have a lower tax structure, it tends to be at least one factor that's not discouraging business, but that is in fact encouraging businesses to come. So, we have that. But there's a balancing act there too, because we don't want economic development to trump that respect for constitutional rights. And right now we have a fight in this state over property rights,
Right.
and the use of eminent domain.
Yeah, that's scary.
And so we have to be careful. You want economic development. We have programs, many different programs, to try to attract businesses, and we have done that.
Yeah.
And even our state universities have different programs and research areas and things like that help to spawn business startups and help
cool.
to incentivize businesses to expand, and so we have that. I know at UNI we've got a 3D printer there. They reach out to other businesses in the Cedar Valley area and beyond, and help them with certain kinds of functions that it would be too costly for those businesses to be able to afford.
Sure, that's
So,
cool.
and of course, Iowa State University has the same type of thing there. And so our universities are involved in that. Our Department of Economic Development's involved in that. And, so that is something that is helping us and to spur a certain amount of growth in the state.
Sure.
But we're just going to need to continue to do that. And
I think
and I think the pro-life movement figures into that, because
I'd agree.
if we would have half of the people that were killed by abortion,
Yeah, right.
that are of working age,
That's right.
if we had half of them, that would be enough people to cover all the jobs that businesses are looking for now.
Right.
You cannot kill off your young and
Right.
expect to prosper and grow.
Yeah.
And
That's why
so-
on the federal level, Social Security is in such disarray, because we've wiped out millions of lives that would be working age feeding into the Social Security. So those receiving Social Security would be taking out, and the whole system's in a disarray because our nation lost its focus and took its eyes off of what was important, and that's protecting children. I think one of the other attractions for a lot of families is education. We talked about how important education was to you, and self-educating, homeschooling your family. I believe you're on an education committee even.
Right.
What are your thoughts on expanding parental rights, school choice, returning more of that local control to school boards? I'd say I'd like to see a lot of it at the school boards, but I'd also like to see families with children in the school be able to control the school boards a little better, and then keeping in the family ranks and not at the state or federal level. Like, how do we do that?
Well, I think that the bill we passed in 2023 and Governor Reynolds signed, and she was a big promoter of school choice, but that idea of being able to let the money follow the student. We've done that with open enrollment. We've done that now with the ESA program that allows students to be able to take that funding and go to the private school of their choice. It helps families to be able to choose the kind of educational setting that's best for their child.
Yeah.
And you want families to be able to not feel stuck in a school system. You want them to feel like they can go and find that kind of setting that's going to work for their child. And that's going to all contribute to helping to make education better.
Yeah. We have a school here, kindergarten through 8th grade, Calvary Christian Academy. That's a shameless plug. But I believe homeschooling is really important for families. I'm also a huge proponent for Christian education. I don't mind families putting their kids in the public school system either. Listen, I know some amazing teachers in the public school system, amazing administrators, but the public school system has lost its way. When I grew up in Arizona, and I've shared this a few times on Grassroots Iowa here, but I grew up in another state taking the Iowa assessment test. Like, this was the center of education for a long time in this country. And that's kind of gone to the wayside. A lot of schools turned away from education for the concept of ideological indoctrination. And we have, especially in our area, there's some of these local schools have really fallen to the wayside, and there's a mass exodus out of a number of them and going into the public school systems in some of the smaller communities around us. But also a lot of those families are just going straight into that homeschool environment. But I do agree with you that education savings account, and for those of you that aren't taking advantage of that, maybe you've never heard of it. A lot of folks, it's surprising to me how many people still haven't heard of education savings accounts, where around roughly $8,000 can follow the student to a private school, a Christian school of your choice. It gives parents the freedom to choose, like what you said, what's best for them, but it also challenges the public school system to do better.
Right.
And that is an important part of it. When we were in Arizona, they didn't call them ESAs, they called them STOs, the state tuition organizations. Now, actually, you can either opt into the STO program in Arizona or the ESA. They do have a similar ESA program as well. And when I was growing up in Arizona, we were one of the worst in the country. They considered us a border state. And so, we were a border state, but, so I guess the education demands weren't as high, because you had kids in the classrooms that had ESL, English as a second language issues. And so there were just fewer priorities on education. But what happened when they introduced state tuition organizations is it made the public schools work harder to draw families in, and it brought up the level of education. They stopped phoning it in and actually started doing what they were supposed to do. And now Arizona's rising nationally in the ranks, and Iowa has been falling. But I do think that we're starting to see a shift now. And it's funny how many people are against it without even really understanding what it is. How can we do a better job of letting people know they even exist,
It's just going to probably take some time.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that competition makes everyone better.
Yes.
And as that continues on, then I think slowly people will realize that it's better to have more competition. The school performance is better. The kids are doing better.
Right.
And so I think it just takes time, because so many people are still, stuck in that tunnel vision of only seeing their local public school as a viable alternative.
The only option.
Yeah, the only option.
Yeah.
And that's been that way for so many years. And to kind of pull back and enlarge your vision and see that there can be more than just that local school in your town, that model that you've always known. There can be many more models than just that. And I know that we've had trouble with some of our schools, some of our public schools with the CRT and the DEI.
Yeah, right.
I don't think we've had trouble in all of our schools with it. But we have had trouble in some of them, and that's what's driven a lot of the legislation we've had to try to, get that out of those schools. And it's pretty hard because some of that indoctrination has been there a very long time. Right. And so now we're switching and we're saying, no, we don't want that. And so it's going to take a while to pull it out. So, I say that, but also, I want to point out that our state universities have a role to play because they train those teachers.
Right.
And so that has to be cleaned up too.
Exactly.
And so we're working on that. I know the Board of Regents is working on that.
Oh, good.
But that's, that's been festering and going downhill for many years too.
Yeah.
And so that has to change.
I recently talked to
another thing I think that's got to change is parents have to get more interested in taking a look and seeing what their kids are learning.
Yes, thank you.
And we've got a lot of parents, too many, in our schools that are not taking a look and seeing what their kids are learning. And some of the learning is coming on the computer, so they aren't bringing the textbook home that that we used to have brought home and parents could see it. But we need more parents to take a look and parent their kids, nurture their kids, pay attention to their kids, what they're seeing, what they're doing, who they're with. We've got to have more of that. So improving education is going to take the universities, it's going to take the schools, but it's also going to take the parents.
Amen.
And we need all of those at work. And
it's going to take, that old phrase, teamwork makes the dream work, right? Everybody has to get involved. And I would agree. I talk to a lot of families that just don't have the time maybe, or at least that's the way they see it. They're two working, a husband and wife out working long hours. They come home. Hey, did you do your homework? Oh, it's all done. I remember telling my parents that too, but we didn't have the same kind of dual working class families, set up. So I couldn't get away with that. But I understand how difficult it is for a lot of families, but there has to be a way to, like you said, kind of wrangle it all in and get everybody back involved. And in Scripture, Proverbs 22, it says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. What people, I think, sometimes don't understand when you get into that in the Hebrew construct of that, when it says train up a child, it's literally talking about preparing them for battle to some degree, the kind of training that you would put a soldier through. And I don't think, and I'm not talking about, guns and things like that. I'm talking about really taking the time. You don't just, sit with a soldier for a few minutes and send him out onto the battlefield. There's a rigorous process of readying them for what's ahead. And I think we lose track of that when it comes to the role that we as parents have for our children. And I would even say that grandparents need to also remember their role. Those young people should be looking up to you, and you should have that, grandparent relationship, grandparent-grandchild relationship that really spurs on opportunities for instruction and encouragement, which causes growth. Certainly something that we need a lot more of. I really appreciate your heart and all of that.
That's good. I like the way you think about that.
We need more people thinking it, for sure.
And it's just... it's just you can't, it is not as important having your child in every blooming thing that comes along.
Oh my goodness.
You can't have them in football and soccer and basketball and play this instrument and play that instrument and play this. You got to choose.
Yeah.
It is not as necessary that they be in all that.
And most of those kids are never going to play, professional sports. And I think sports is an important part of a young person's life.
It's a part, but
it doesn't need to play the role that it does today. And a lot of the travel sports. So you're doing, basketball in season, and then you have, another 6 months of out of season travel basketball where parents are taking the kids all over, not just the state, but a bunch of other states. And again, I see it for students that show this, incredible aptitude for something, and maybe they are going to take it to college, or that will be the thing that allows them to go to college. But that's such a small part of our society.
And what you got to always realize, you're always choosing something. And if you're choosing to do all those things, then you're not choosing
Hey, I like
time at
that.
home,
That's right.
interaction with family. You're sacrificing that interaction with family
Right.
and that time to get to know one another,
Sure.
to have input into your
Just
kids'
sit around the
life.
dinner table at
Yeah.
night and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Have that little basket where everybody puts their phone, and I'd like to get back to the 50s at some point, and that'd be kind of nice.
There were a lot of healthy things about the way of life then.
Right. Let's talk agriculture. Iowa's agriculture community, it faces a lot of challenges. You got regulations, labor issues. Of course, there's market access. What policies are maybe you prioritizing to support family farms and ensure rural Iowa thrives? Because that's a problem.
Yeah, we have done a number of things regarding agriculture this past session, in particular water quality.
That's a big deal right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it right now, and we've taken the water quality programs we have now, and we prioritize the money differently. We put it into those programs that are working and need more funding, and taking it out of programs that don't need as much funding or haven't worked as
Sure.
well.
No, that makes sense.
So, it's better use of taxpayer money, but that there's a lot of emphasis in farming now on practices that advance soil conservation, water quality, like using cover crops, like buffer strips, bioreactors, building wetlands, and various. There's a lot of different practices like that.
Sure.
No-till farming.
I
Grass
should bring
waterways.
I should bring my wife in on this conversation. She is so into all of this. I love hearing you talk about it. Yeah.
It's good. I mean, there's been a lot of changes in how farmers practice, and there's been a lot of improvement in the amount of soil that is eroding. It's reduced a great deal because there's been so many farmers that have implemented so many of these practices over the years.
That's awesome.
So things are improving.
Well, that's
and
good to hear. I don't think that
it
gets enough press. That's
no,
good.
it doesn't. And there's some real success stories that have occurred. We have a representative in the legislature that works for the DNR, and he works in particular in the water quality program.
Yeah.
And he said, we've got some lakes where you might only be able to see, like a number of years ago, you might only be able to see maybe 3 feet down into the water. But he said now some of those lakes, you can see 10 and 30 feet down into the water. So there's some real success stories out there. And, unfortunately, I don't think the press carries much of that, but
right.
We have a voluntary program. There's some people that are pushing to make these requirements mandatory. But the thing about it is, if you make the requirements mandatory, you're going to make it a lot more expensive to farm, and that will drive some people out,
Sure.
and it'll just ends up having the effect of making the farms bigger.
Right.
And we don't want to make the farms bigger.
Bring in all the big conglomerate farming.
Yes, you want to try to keep as many farmers farming.
Keep it local.
Yes, keep as much as possible. And so that's why the DNR and the Department of Agriculture do a lot to educate farmers about all these different practices. They have field days and workshops all over the state. I just attended one about 2 weeks ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was pretty neat. He's put on cover crops for 20 years now, the farm we went to.
Wow.
And it's made a big difference because the more cover crop you have, the more biomass,
sure,
the soil health increases, and you don't need as much synthetic fertilizer
Right.
to put on your
Have you
ground.
ever heard of the lunatic farmer? This guy on the East Coast. He's a real strong Christian. Boy, my wife knows his actual name, but he's known as the lunatic farmer. But this is what he does. Like, and he actually was challenged in his state, and they tried to stop him. But then they realized over the years that his way of farming was actually good for the land and good for the people. And there's actually a lot of missionaries now around the world that are going to his farm and learning what he's doing and taking it out into, and exactly what you're talking about, cover crops and all the things that I think if we can get people to take another look at, it, I think could help to turn the corner, and we wouldn't have all of the pesticides and all the things. Like I said, we live out in rural Iowa, and I'm not always thrilled when I hear, the crop dusters coming in, and we've got, like I said, animals and all kinds of things out there. Thankfully, there's some folks not far from us that have bees, and so they have to be told a day in advance, and so they'll let folks have notice. That's always a good. I'm thinking about getting bees because I love honey, and I think we need more bees. But I'd also like to know 24 hours in advance when they're going to be spraying our area.
Yeah.
Let's talk marriage and family. No doubt you're a strong advocate of the traditional family. Can you share your perspective on defending traditional marriage and that family structure in the face of all of this cultural shift? Because, Iowa, it's interesting. On one hand, you have this beautiful picture of, that American family unit. And then on the other hand, there's this complete abandonment of that. Like, how did we get here? Where are we going?
Well, with the decision in 2015 to legalize same-sex marriage, the Obergefell decision, that was a that's a big deal, low point. I have read some statistics where same-sex marriage is starting to fall out of favor with in some circles now. And I think that will only increase as time goes on, because marriage is supposed to be a place where children can be raised in a secure, committed environment with a mother and father married to each other.
Yes, ma'am.
That's how God meant it to be, so children could have the best chance. So when we legalize the same-sex marriage with the Obergefell decision, what we said is that it's okay for a child to experience loss.
Wow.
It's okay that a child is either motherless or fatherless.
Wow, that's deep.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So what we've done is we have said, we know better than God. We don't need a mother to supply what a mother supplies and a father to supply what a father supplies to a family. No, we need what a mother supplies. We need what a father supplies. A child needs what each one supplies.
That's right.
And they can't do without it. And yes, some are doing without it. And God's grace is great.
Yes,
but
amen.
it's best to follow God's plan and design. And it's not okay for us to approve a child experiencing loss. I think that our government policy is really allowing that is wrong, and it needs to go back. We need to.
So you think maybe overturning that, finding a way to overturn that ruling?
We need to overturn it. I introduced a resolution to, urging that the Supreme Court overturn that decision.
Yeah.
But we got a ways to go to understand that children's needs and wants should trump adult desires.
Right. Amen. Amen. Jesus, Mark chapter 10, he said, "For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife." And he's quoting out of Genesis. And, if people would just look at the bigger picture, the biblical picture of what not just a traditional American family, nuclear family is supposed to look like, but biblically speaking, what is a family? It's a man and it's a woman who come together in the bond of marriage and who love each other and who bring children into the world and raise them up in the ways of the Lord. There's this beautiful picture that I think was for such a long time a part of not just Iowa's structure, but the very fabric of this nation. And we have lost our way. But I think that we're seeing a return to that. There's a lot of young people right now that are becoming disenfranchised with the liberal movements. And you're seeing them turn to the Lord, and you're seeing them turn to conservatism. And I, for one, couldn't be more thrilled about what we're seeing there. It brings me to another question of faith. It obviously plays a pretty significant role for a lot of Iowa families. What role do you think churches and faith communities should play in addressing some of these societal changes that we're seeing? Because it can't just be government, right? Like the government, state government, federal government, they have their part to play in getting back to where we need to be. But how does the church come alongside of that? Do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. The church is indispensable. I mean, the church is supposed to be the voice of God, speaking the truth to society, speaking what the Bible says about what works, what reality looks like, what God says,
right.
What man's condition is. And if the church loses her voice and doesn't speak that message, who's going to speak it?
Right.
No, there isn't anybody.
Yeah.
That's the role that the church has. And to come alongside and assist families in being able to carry out their God-given responsibilities.
Yeah.
I mean, the church is indispensable, and I think there just needs to be more teaching on these cultural issues that have eroded the fabric of life and marriage and family and identity. The church needs to speak more to these issues to help people understand, yeah, I feel this is wrong, but now I know why it's wrong.
There it is.
Because my pastor explained it to me and showed me in the scripture.
Right. And I think that's a key factor is pastors being willing to have those conversations with their congregants, really bringing the biblical principles to the people that I think a lot of folks believe are political. They're not. When we're talking about abortion, when we're talking about family, those aren't political conversations. Those are biblical conversations that have been, tweaked and perverted, so people start to get into that argument, the whole nonsense separation of church and state, and, losing track of the church's responsibility within it all to instruct the people in the community to get involved. In our church, we don't shy away from any issue. We teach through the Bible. If it's in the Bible, we talk about it.
That's good.
And within that, we're regularly encouraging people to get involved in the town square, to run for school boards, to run for public offices. I'm sure there's a time in the not too distant future that I'll be doing that. I think that it's important that we see people, in the faith communty, not just voting their faith. I hope that Christians get out and vote their faith. Let's do that. But taking that next step and being involved, going and speaking at a school board meeting, going down to the local, city council and having your voice heard. I think those are, good second and third steps, and then seeing where it goes from there. But we've lost a lot as a people by thinking, well, the church is supposed to be over here and government's supposed to be over there, and neither the two shall meet. I was blessed a couple of years back when the presidential election, DeSantis was running, and I had opportunity to sit down with he and his wife a few times. And they were neat folks. We had them here at the church twice, but they had a really interesting story about how his wife got the local churches paired up with the government there in Florida. And I see it as a turning point for the state there. And that was one of the things that they really saw was, people would come in and they would need help, whether it was food stamps or issues with children or whatever it was. And they would be assigned a social worker. And then there was also a government office that would get a hold of a local congregation, and they would also be assigned somebody from that congregation. And so the congregant would work with the social worker. And what they found was they had very little return for needs because the church would come alongside of these folks and help with, the kids and, daycare situations and food and all of this stuff. All of a sudden the government, there was less and less weight and burden on the government's shoulders. And I thought, gosh, boy, do we need that in this state. Boy, do we need that in this country as a whole. Like the church getting back involved and, finding its place and finding its voice. I'm glad you have that heart. I think we need a lot of people to hear that call. We're running out of time. We've only got a couple minutes left. What else? What do you want people to hear about you? I know you're running for office right now, an office that you already hold. I appreciate all the work that you have done and that you plan to do. As a few parting words, what do you want people to know about you?
Well, I know I've had a lot of support across the state. And so if you're one of those people out there that supported me, I want to thank you very much for your support.
I love that.
I can't do it without the support of many people. It takes a big team to do it. So thank you so much. And you might be a person that feels like you're called to run or you're called to speak up. And so contact Pastor Higgins over here and he'll train you on how to speak up at different meetings, county and city meetings, and help you run for office, because we surely need good people to get involved.
How do people get a hold of you? What your website?
My website is sandysalmon.org.
sandysalmon.org. I want to say, Senator Salmon, thank you for your service to America. Thank you for your service to the people of Iowa. Most importantly, thank you for your service to the Lord God Almighty. Clearly, the Lord shines in your life. And I think that's a big reason why you've been so successful in your time in public office and with family. If today's discussion, y'all, has encouraged you, I'd encourage you to share it with others. Subscribe. Join us next time on Grassroots Iowa. We're having these conversations at the crossroads of faith and politics because they matter. We love you guys. God bless you. God bless the state of Iowa. And God bless the good old US of A.